Vivid verses.
The thing about Nora is that she laughed with her whole body. I noticed it the first time at a mutual friend's dinner party, the kind with mismatched chairs and a pasta sauce that needed another 40 minutes it didn't get. She was seated across from me, and something the host said sent her sideways in her chair, one hand flat on the table, shoulders shaking before the actual sound arrived. I remember thinking, there's someone who doesn't perform happiness. That was the tell. Real joy has a delay, a kind of physical overtaking. Performed joy hits right on cue. I'm an architect. I spend a significant portion of my professional life understanding how structures bear weight, where load concentrates, where things want to fail, how to build something that will last the application of real force. I do not think this makes me better at reading people, but it does mean I notice when something is load-bearing and when it's decorative. Nora's laugh was load-bearing. It was the real thing holding up the facade. We started talking that night over plates that never quite got cleared. She was a landscape designer. She made spaces for people to exist in without quite realizing they were being guided. I told her that was not so different from architecture, and she said the difference was that plants grew. Things I built just stood. I thought about that for a while. I'm still not sure she was wrong. We dated without a great deal of drama in the early period. Dinners at her apartment, weekend walks, the slow accumulation of context about each other's lives. She met my colleagues at a firm event. I met her sister at a birthday brunch. It felt like the natural rhythm of two people who liked each other and were not in a hurry to perform that liking for an audience. The shift, when it came, was so gradual that I didn't recognize it as a shift at first. I cataloged it as moods. Everyone has moods. A hard week at work, a family stress, the particular atmospheric pressure of autumn that seems to push people inward. I gave it room. I gave it time. I asked, gently when it seemed to linger. "Nothing's wrong," she said. Not the words. The words were fine. It was the tone, flat, final. A door swung shut before I'd finished knocking. The nothing of someone who means the opposite and is daring you to say so. I filed it. I waited. The pattern established itself over the following weeks with the kind of reliability that, in any other context, I would have called clockwork. She would be warm for a stretch, present, attentive, laughing again, the version of herself I'd watch tip sideways in a mismatched chair. Then, without transition or apparent trigger, it would be gone. Texts answered in single words after long delays. Plans confirmed and then quietly degraded. She'd show up late, or distracted, or already somewhere else in her head before she arrived physically. I contact that skimmed rather than landed. And when I asked, because of course I asked, I'm not a man who mistakes pride for dignity. The answer was always a variation of nothing. Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. I'm just tired. Why do you always think something's wrong? That last one was particularly interesting. The reframe. The way the question about her became a question about my perception, my neediness, my tendency to see problems. I noticed it. I didn't say anything about it yet, because I'm not interested in winning individual exchanges. I'm interested in understanding what's actually happening. So I kept a running analysis. I'm wired that way. I can't entirely help it. I'll look for triggers. Timing, topics, events. Was it related to her work, a difficult client, a project going sideways? Was it something in her family? Was it me? Something I'd said or failed to say? Some expectation I wasn't meeting? I found nothing consistent. No trigger mapped reliably to the cold spells. They arrived and departed on their own schedule, which told me something. If there's no external trigger, the cause is internal. And if the cause is internal, but the behavior is relentlessly outward, directed, performed, aimed, then it's a choice. Not a mood, a method. I didn't leap to that conclusion. I let it sit. I wanted to be fair to her, fair to us, fair to the possibility that I was reading something that wasn't there. But weeks passed, and the cycles continued, and I found myself doing a particular kind of math that I don't enjoy. The math went like this. Every time I reached toward her in the cold spells, a check-in call, a question about her day, a direct ask about what was wrong, the warmth returned slightly faster. Not immediately, but the reaching seemed to function as a reset. She'd soften within a day or two, and things would be good again, and I would feel the relief of that good period and not examine too closely what had produced it. That's the insidious thing about intermittent reward. It doesn't feel like manipulation while it's happening. It feels like weather. You can't control it, you can only respond to it, and when the sun comes back, you're just grateful. I recognized the structure eventually. It took me longer than I'd like to admit, because I liked her, and we like to believe the people we like are not doing things like this to us. But the structure was there. I had built enough things to know a load-bearing element when I kept running into it. The question was what to do with the knowledge. I decided, quietly and without announcement, to stop. Not to stop caring about her. Not to stop being present when I was with her. But to stop doing the reaching that reset the cycle. To stop making the calls that pulled her back from a cold. To stop asking what was wrong in a tone that communicated, "Your answer controls how I feel." I want to be honest about what this felt like because I think people sometimes describe this kind of decision as easy, as if clarity is the same as comfort. It wasn't easy. I liked Nora. I liked who she was in the warm periods, and I liked who I was around her in those periods. More patient than usual, more willing to slow down, more interested in the particular texture of another person's world. There's a version of this story where I fight harder. I'm aware of it. I chose not to live in it. Here's why. I'm not interested in earning someone's warmth. I am not interested in demonstrating, through accumulated effort and anxiety, that I value another person enough to chase them when they withdraw. That is not what love is. That is an audition process. You show up, you perform your devotion, you wait for the callback. And maybe you get it, and maybe you don't, and maybe the whole thing repeats next season with new material. I've watched this structure destroy people. Not quickly, but slowly across years, until they're so accustomed to performing for approval that they've forgotten what it felt like to simply exist alongside someone without the performance. I have a low tolerance for becoming that. So I stopped chasing the warmth, and I started simply living my life. This sounds more dramatic than it was in practice. In practice, it meant when she was present with me, I was present with her. When she withdrew, I did not fill the vacuum with effort. I called friends I'd been meaning to call. I got back to a reading project I'd let slide. I went to the gym at hours I'd previously been reserving in case she wanted to do something. I cooked elaborate dinners for myself and ate them standing at my kitchen counter, reading unbothered. I realized, more relaxed than I'd been in months. That observation made me sad in a way I didn't immediately know what to do with. The first sign that something had shifted in the dynamic came about a week into my quiet withdrawal. She texted on a Tuesday evening, not a response to anything I'd sent because I hadn't sent anything. Just, "Hey, haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" I read it at my kitchen counter, standing exactly as I'd been standing, and I felt two things simultaneously. The first was a small, cold satisfaction. Not triumphant, nothing like that, just the recognition that the pattern I'd identified was real and operating as predicted. The second was a sadness that was warmer and harder to categorize. I would have preferred to be wrong. Wrongness would have meant there was nothing to understand, nothing to navigate, just two people with ordinary friction learning each other. But the text confirmed the structure. I'd stopped reaching. The dynamic had shifted. I texted back, "All good, been a busy week. Hope yours is well. Warm, unremarkable, nothing to pull on." She responded immediately. The delay that characterized her cold spell messages entirely gone. We had a brief, pleasant exchange. She suggested getting together that weekend. I said I had planned Saturday, but Sunday worked. She said Sunday was perfect. This is interesting, I thought. This is very interesting. I want to be precise here about what I was doing and what I was not doing. I was not playing games. I was not manufacturing distance to punish her or to trigger a particular response to prove a theory. I was simply living my life as I intended to live it, without structuring my days around the management of her moods and observing what happened when I did. There's a meaningful difference between a controlled experiment and a manipulation. The first is about understanding. The second is about control. I was interested in understanding. Sunday dinner at her apartment. She made a lamb dish she'd been wanting to try, and it was genuinely good, spiced in a way that suggested she'd done research and cared about the result. The table was set with more intention than usual. Candles. The good glasses. I noticed all of it and said nothing about it beyond honest appreciation for the food. She was warm the entire evening. Easy conversation, the laugh making appearances. At one point, she reached across the table and touched my hand and left hers there for a moment before returning to her glass. I watched her do it. I thought, you are working right now, and you don't know that I know. I didn't hold it against her. Not exactly, but I filed it. After dinner, on her back patio with tea going cold in our mugs, she asked if I'd been bothered by how things had been lately. I said things had seemed a little off. Yeah. She said she was sorry. She just had a lot on her mind. I said I understood, and I didn't push further, and I watched something move across her face that might have been relief or might have been something more complicated. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for about 4 minutes, not doing anything, just thinking. The second cold spell arrived 11 days later. I'd half expected it. The cycle had been running on roughly a 2-week rhythm, but expecting something doesn't fully insulate you from it. There's a specific feeling that accompanies the arrival of a deliberate chill from someone you've been close to, a feeling that is not quite hurt and not quite anger, but lives in the neighborhood of both. A slight tightening, a recalibration. I did what I've been doing. I live my life. I call my friend Theo, whom I've been meaning to have over for weeks, and we spent a Saturday afternoon grilling on my balcony and talking about nothing in particular. His landscaping business, a renovation project I was consulting on, the kind of conversation that asks nothing of you except to be present for it. It was one of the better afternoons I'd had in a while. I texted Nora twice in that period, once to share something I'd read that I genuinely thought she'd find interesting for her work, once to confirm that I was still planning to come to her colleague's small dinner party the following week. Both texts were genuine. Neither was a reach toward warmth. Neither was fishing for engagement. Just the ordinary maintenance of a life that included her. She responded to both, briefly. Fine. Okay. I went to the dinner party. It was a small thing. Her colleague Bex and Bex's partner, another couple, a woman named Audra who worked in urban planning. Good conversation, decent wine. Nora was pleasant to everyone, including me, with the particular pleasantness of someone performing normalcy. I knew her actual warmth by now. This was not it. This was a very competent approximation. After the dinner, walking to our separate cars in the cold, we'd driven independently. She said almost sideways, not quite looking at me. You've seemed different lately. Different how? I asked, genuinely curious. I don't know. More. Fine with everything. I considered that for a moment. Is that a problem? No, she said. Then, I don't know. We said goodnight. I drove home. The 4 minutes in the parking garage turned into 6. 2 more weeks. 1 more warm spell, 1 more cold. I want to be clear about something. I was not waiting for a confrontation. I was not building toward a dramatic accounting. If things had simply faded, if she'd grown genuinely distant and we'd drifted apart by mutual entropy, I would have let that happen without a scene. Some things end without requiring a verdict. But that's not what was happening. What was happening was I understood the structure of this, and I'd stopped feeding it, and I could feel the pressure building in the system because systems under stress don't stay static. Something was going to shift. I couldn't tell you what or when, but I was attentive to the possibility. You don't design structures without developing a sense for the moment before a load exceeds capacity. It happened on a Wednesday evening. I was at her apartment. We'd had a quiet dinner, one of those evenings that starts pleasant and turns uncertain without any identifiable cause. The cold was on, had been on for 5 or 6 days. She'd been fine throughout dinner, surface level fine, and afterward we'd moved to the couch and she'd had the television on without watching it, which is something she did when she was somewhere else entirely. I was reading. I'd stopped pretending not to read when she was checked out. If she was elsewhere, I was going to be somewhere useful too. My book was open, I was actually in it, and then I became aware that she was crying. Not loudly, not in a way designed to be noticed immediately. Just the quality of silence changing, and when I looked over, the reflection of the screen catching the tracks on her face. I closed the book. I waited. I'm patient about these things. I don't know why you're still here, she said. The voice was low and cracked at the edges. I thought carefully about what she meant by that, because it could mean several things. It could be a statement of genuine confusion. It could be a gambit to prompt reassurance. It could be both. The crying felt real. I didn't discount the crying. Talk to me, I said. Not a command. An open door. She looked at the television for another long moment. Then she turned to me, and the thing on her face was complicated. Shame and something else, something that looked almost like defiance, like she decided to say the true thing and was braced for what that would cost. I do it on purpose, she said. I held still. Do it on purpose. Pull back. Go cold. She used a hand to gesture at the space between us in a way that encompassed all of it. Every cycle, every nothing is wrong, every returned warmth that I'd stopped chasing. I do it to see how you'll respond, to see if you'll fight for it. Fight for me. Silence. The television murmured something. I sat with that for a moment, not because I was surprised, but because the moment deserved more than a fast response. I've been carrying this understanding for weeks, had turned it over and examined it from multiple angles, had even, in some private corner of myself, hoped I was wrong. But I hadn't been wrong. The structure I'd identified was real, and here she was confirming it, and she was crying, and I felt something that was not satisfaction or vindication, but was instead a very clean, quiet grief. She was still looking at me. Her eyes were asking something that her words hadn't quite managed to form. Maybe what now? Maybe say you understand. Maybe tell me you'll try harder. I thought about what to say. Not long. I'm not someone who freezes in these moments. But I wanted precision here. Not cruelty, not theater. Precision. Nora. Her name first, because this was not abstract. This was about her specifically, and I wasn't going to let it become a speech to an audience of one. I've known for a while. Something moved through her face. I noticed the pattern weeks ago. I tried to find other explanations. I genuinely did, because I wanted there to be other explanations. There weren't. So I stopped. I said it plainly. I stopped chasing the warmth when you withdrew it. Not to punish you, because I was done doing something that wasn't good for either of us. You never said anything. Not accusatory. More like bewildered. I know. I was watching to see if I was right. I didn't want to accuse you of something I wasn't certain of. A beat. I was right. She pulled her knees up, made herself smaller on the couch. I know it's not fair. It's something I do. I've done it before. This last sentence had a particular quality of shame attached to it. Not performed shame, but the kind that comes from recognizing a pattern in yourself you don't fully understand and don't like. I felt some genuine tenderness toward her in that moment. I want to be honest about that. She was being honest, finally, and honesty at cost deserve something. But tenderness is not the same as agreement, and clarity is not the same as cruelty. I appreciate you telling me, I said. That's real, and I mean it. What you just did took something. She nodded barely, waiting, and I want to say something carefully because I don't want it to sound like a punishment. It's not. It's just true. I turned slightly toward her because this deserved direct address. I don't fight for access to someone who's deliberately withholding. That's not love, that's auditions. She went very still. What you were doing, even if it comes from somewhere real, somewhere afraid, it was asking me to perform for you, to prove myself on a schedule you controlled. And I won't do that. I said it evenly, not hard, not soft, just level. Not because I don't care about you. I do. But because that performance, that's not how I love someone, and it's not how I want to be loved. She was quiet for a long time. The television filled the space. So what does that mean? She asked finally. Her voice was smaller than I'd heard it. It means I'm going to go home tonight. And I think we both need to sit with this for a while. I stood, collected the jacket I draped over the armrest when I arrived. I wasn't rushing. I'm not a dramatic exit kind of person, but I was moving. I don't have anger about this. I want you to know that. I'm not leaving because I'm furious. I'm leaving because there's nothing useful left for tonight, and we both need some space to be honest with ourselves. She didn't ask me to stay. That was, I thought, the most honest thing she'd done all evening. She called the following morning. I was on my second cup of coffee, sketching some preliminary ideas for a project I've been putting off, a small residential commission, a family who wanted something that would age well, which is always the kind of brief I find most interesting. When I say sketching, I mean actually sketching, pencil on paper, the analog work that clears my head in a way that software doesn't. I let it ring through to voicemail. I want to explain why, because it's easy to misread that as coldness. It wasn't. I'd said what I needed to say the night before, clearly, completely, with nothing held back. A phone call the following morning, at the distance of less than 12 hours, wasn't going to add anything useful. It was going to be either a continuation of her grief, which I couldn't resolve for her, or an attempt at a conversation that neither of us had had the time and sleep required to have well. I'm not someone who avoids hard conversations. I'd had the hard conversation. What I avoid is the continuation of hard conversations past the point of productive return into the territory where things get said that people don't mean and that create new damage without resolving the original. She didn't leave a voicemail. I noted that, filed it without much weight attached. Some people don't leave voicemails. It doesn't signify. But I noticed. I went back to my sketches. The family wanted a covered outdoor space that would function across seasons, a connection between inside and outside that felt intentional rather than incidental. I was thinking about how to handle the threshold, the exact moment of transition. It's always the threshold that matters most. The middle of a space is just a middle. It's the edges, the transitions, the places where one thing becomes another. Those are where design either works or doesn't. I thought about Nora briefly and then set that thought aside. There was work to do. She texted 3 days later. I've been thinking about what you said. I think I understand. I also think I should probably talk to someone about why I do that. A professional someone. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. I just think it's true. I read it twice. Then I responded, I think that's a really good idea. I hope you do. No ellipsis. No, but no door left ajar in a way that could be mistaken for an invitation. Just a straight response to what she'd said. She sent one more about 20 minutes later. For what it's worth, the times that were real were real. I held that one for a minute. I know, I wrote back. Same. And that was where I left it. Not a slamming door, not a locked gate, not the performance of finality that people sometimes mistake for strength. Just a quiet closing. Two people arriving at the edge of a chapter and setting it down. Theo came over that Friday, as had become something of a habit since I'd restarted my social life with more genuine intention. He brought a bottle of wine I'd mentioned once in passing 3 weeks earlier and could not imagine he'd remembered. I told him as much. I wrote it down, he said, entirely unbothered, and handed it to me and went to find the corkscrew. We ate at the kitchen table with the window open slightly, because the temperature had turned mild overnight with the particular generosity of early spring. He asked about Nora without asking directly. He mentioned her name in a context that made it easy to answer or easy to redirect, which is the mark of someone who actually knows how to be a friend. I told him the short version. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciate about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "Did you see it coming?" "I saw it while it was happening," I said. "Not coming. That's different. Is it better or worse?" I thought about it. "Clearer," I said. "Not better or worse. Just clearer." He nodded. He poured more wine. The window let in the smell of whatever the neighbor was doing to their garden in the dark. Something green and turned earth and alive. "She's not a bad person," I said, because I wanted to say it out loud as someone who wasn't me. "She's just been doing something that isn't fair and probably doesn't fully know why. That's most people, honestly. Most people are just doing the things they learned somewhere without examining them closely." Is that what we're doing? Examining things closely? "I'm attempting to," I said. "I make no claims about you." He laughed. The dinner went on the way good dinners do, without too much weight, without too much lightness, just two people being honest at a small table with a bottle between them. A few weeks on, I found myself sitting with a blueprint that wasn't cooperating. The covered outdoor space I'd been designing, the residential commission, the family who wanted something that would age well. I'd hit a problem in the structural framing that kept creating compromises I didn't like. To get the look they wanted, the open feel, the broad, uninterrupted ceiling, I needed to solve a load distribution problem that was eating my drafting time. I was in the office late, most of the team gone, and I had the blueprints spread across the large table and a cup of coffee that had been cold for 90 minutes. My colleague Fran knocked on the glass partition and put her head in. "You're going to be here all night." "Probably not all night. You always say that." She looked at the blueprints with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent a decade in residential work. "What's the problem?" I showed her. She stood beside me, and we looked at it together. The point of conflict, the competing demands of form and function. She suggested a solution I hadn't considered, a modification to the beam configuration that would give me the span I needed without visible structural intrusion. I looked at it, turned it over. She was right. It would work. "Why didn't I see that?" I said. "Not quite a question." "Because you've been staring at it too long," she said. "You need fresh eyes. Or cold coffee. Or both." She glanced at the cup on the edge of the table. Apparently just cold coffee. She left. I looked at the modified configuration for another minute, then started making notes. Fresh eyes, I thought. The problem had been that I'd been solving for one constraint at a time. The span, then the look, then the load. When a solution required holding all three simultaneously and finding the shape that accommodated all of them at once. Once you see it, it seems obvious. That's always how the good solutions are. I thought briefly, without meaning to, about Nora. Then I went back to the blueprints. The work was there, and it was good work, and the space it would eventually create, the covered threshold, the place where inside became outside with intention, was going to be right. I could feel that it was going to be right. I stayed another hour, made the corrections, and rolled the blueprints with the quiet satisfaction of a problem honestly solved. What I want to say about love, because this is at its center a story about love or about a particular failure of it, is that I think we often mistake intensity for depth. The intermittent warmth and cold dynamic that Nora had built is, paradoxically, an extremely intense experience. You are constantly calibrated to another person's emotional weather. You monitor, You respond. You feel the warmth of their return with a relief that is sharp and physical. It feels, in those moments, like you're deeply involved with someone. And in a way you are. You're deeply involved with the management of the relationship as a system of anxiety and relief. But that's not the same thing as love. Or at least, it's not the kind of love I want. What I want is the kind of love that is boring in the right ways. The kind where you can exist in a room together without performing for each other. Where trust is so assumed that it's become invisible. The way a good structure becomes invisible. You don't see the load-bearing walls because you're living in the space they're holding up. I know that sounds like something you'd hear from a person who's never experienced real passion. I'm not claiming it's the only kind. I'm claiming it's the kind I'm built for. And I've stopped apologizing for knowing what I'm built for. I've made my mistakes. I've held on to things too long and let go of things too quickly and mistaken intensity for depth more than once. These are not confessions. They're just the record of a person paying attention over time. I try to be honest about the record. What I did with Nora, the quiet audit, the tracking of the pattern, the decision to stop feeding it. I'm not certain it was right in some grand, universal sense. I'm certain it was right for me. That distinction matters. Not everything I do needs to be a prescription. I'm one person working with the information I have. But the thing I said to her, I don't fight for access to someone who's deliberately withholding. That one I'll stand behind. Not because it's clever, because it's true. Love is not a competition to see who wants it more. It is not a test that you pass by trying hard enough. It is not a series of performances for a judge who controls the warmth in the room. When it becomes those things, it has already become something else. And when it's already become something else, you have to call it what it is. She called it something else first. Actually, she admitted to it. And I respected that admission, and I meant it when I said it took something. What it didn't do was change the nature of what she'd been doing. The origin of a behavior doesn't release you from its consequences. I think Nora understood that, which is part of why she was thinking about talking to someone professional. That seems right. That seems like exactly the right move, and I hope she does it. I sat with the rolled blueprints under my arm and walked out of the office into the mild evening and drove home through the dark with the windows cracked and the radio on something instrumental and forgettable. I was all right. Not in the hollow way that people say I'm fine when they mean the opposite. In the actual way. The way where the grief is real and present and accounted for. But it's a clean grief, the kind that comes from seeing something clearly rather than the kind that comes from not understanding what hit you. The distinction matters. I drove home. I made something to eat. I sat at the window for a while and watched the street go quiet as the evening got late. The way it always does, the way it always will, ordinary and unremarkable and entirely enough.
Thanks for listening.